Hi everyone, it's Dr. Jen Kordonsky from Optimal Spine Chiropractic, and this class is about breast cancer prevention strategies. And the class was born from an informal survey that I did years ago in our practice, where Dr. Mark and I asked many of our patients what they thought the best strategy for preventing breast cancer was. And the overwhelming response was, get your mammogram. And this is often what we're told. It's the whole premise of the awareness campaigns. And unfortunately, it's incomplete information. And the logic really isn't there. Saying that a mammogram could prevent breast cancer is just like saying an X-ray could prevent a fracture. It's impossible. An X-ray can detect a fracture just as a mammogram could detect breast cancer. And detection is important, don't get me wrong. Unfortunately, detection is not the same as prevention. And prevention strategies are what we're focusing on here in this class. Realistic things. And, you know, the 1971, President Nixon declared war on cancer. Since that time, the federal government has spent over $105 billion on this war against cancer. We see ad campaigns like Fight Like a Girl, and for all this money and all this fighting and all this awareness, have we really made a dent? Are we in a better place now in the fight against cancer than we were before? Unfortunately, back in 1960, 1 in 20 women were diagnosed with breast cancer. Today, that number is 1 in 8. And it's projected that by the year 2040, that number is going to double and the incidence is going to be in younger and younger women. So I want to remind you of a little story that I often share about Mother Teresa. And the story goes that she was asked at one point to participate in an anti-war rally. And she declined the invitation, but said, "Please let me know when there's a rally for peace." And what I love about this story is that it clearly demonstrates what she understood, that what we give our attention to grows. Fighting something gives energy to it. We need to put our actions, our energy, our efforts, not into just fighting disease, fighting cancer, but really put our energy into building health. Put your energy into what you want more of, not what you want less of. And that's a strategy that applies through every facet of our lives. But tonight in particular, we're talking about breast cancer, of course. And there's certainly things that are not within our control. You know, for example, there are certain genes that increase our risk of breast cancer. And it's important, very important to understand this, because I don't think it's emphasized enough that those genes cannot, no gene can cause breast cancer. The gene doesn't cause the breast cancer. Something has to turn that gene on. Something has to cause that genetic information to express. And those are signals from the environment. So it's very important to understand that a gene can only raise someone's risk, and there are other risk factors that are in our control that we can modify so that that one risk factor doesn't have to dominate our lives. Now, of course, women get breast cancer more frequently than men. Not that men don't get it, but women have a higher risk, of course. And the reason being is that we have more estrogen in our bodies. So estrogen is a hormone, and among other things, what estrogen can do, or what it does, is cause breast cells to mature. So if we're exposed to, it causes breast cell growth. So if we're exposed to excess or estrogen for too long of a period of time, then that excess breast tissue growth or cell growth can turn into cancer. Interesting to note, though, that pregnancy and breastfeeding cause the breast cells to mature. And a mature breast cell is less susceptible to estrogen's effects. Just like imagine that a mature adult is less susceptible to, bad influences, and an immature adolescent would be more susceptible to outside negative influences. So in fact, when a pregnancy occurs earlier in life, that increases our protective factor. And the longer a woman spends breastfeeding, the more protection against breast cancer is offered because of the maturity of the breast cells. Obviously, breastfeeding and getting pregnant are not something that we're going to run out and do just because we want to lower our risk of breast cancer. But I bring it up because it's important to think about as a community what we can do to support and encourage these practices more. And a lot of new mothers have an incredibly difficult time breastfeeding. There are a lot of issues that can be overcome, though, with the right help. And many women aren't getting the right help. So we can be supportive as a community, as a culture, in just our attitude and the way we encourage those around us, strangers, family. And we can also reach out and offer and suggest good lactation consultants are necessary whenever there's a challenge in breastfeeding. It most of the time can be overcome with the right help. And a lot of breastfeeding issues, interestingly, are caused by the baby having a poor latch that can oftentimes be due to a jaw or an upper cervical problem, creating tissue tension, nerve irritation in the tissues. So it may appear like the baby has a tongue tie because the tissues are tight, maybe the jaw doesn't open or work properly. And a lot of these issues can be overcome with very gentle, very specific pediatric chiropractic care. So just knowing that and being able to share that with someone is an important way for you to support these things. But the point is that managing our estrogen exposure is a powerful way to moderate our breast health and to control our breast cancer risk. There are certain factors besides pregnancy and lactation that are within our control, that you can make the conscious choice to engage with these practices or not. So the first thing I'd like to bring up that influences our estrogen production in our body, or estrogen levels in our body, that is within our control, is prescription hormones. Now, many women take prescription hormones either for birth control or for reducing menopausal symptoms, or they end up doing both in their life. And these two classes of drugs, they're estrogens or they're hormones, and they can and do increase our risk slightly for breast cancer. And of course, the longer we are exposed to these, the greater the risk goes. And there are many young women who are taking birth control, not for prevention of pregnancy, but to help them moderate the hormonal symptoms that they have of either premenstrual syndrome or difficult cramps, irregular cycles, difficulty with headaches and migraines, any number of symptoms that fluctuate with hormone levels are often controlled with birth control. And there may be other strategies that aren't being exercised. Of course, chiropractic being a big potential help for these women who are struggling with these type of symptoms, because subluxations in the lumbosacral area can create interference in the reproductive organs, create challenges with the hormones, and of course, headaches and migraines very commonly are addressed with chiropractic care. Sometimes it's a nutritional concern. So just to think about that we may not want to go right to a hormonal solution for some of these issues. This brings me to the next factor that influences estrogen levels in your body, and it's your body weight. Now, unfortunately, obesity is a modern epidemic, and in the last 30 years, the rate of obesity in our children and our adolescents has more than tripled. This is a very serious issue, and it definitely deserves attention. There are 3 ways that obesity can influence estrogen levels and influence our breast cancer risk. Number 1, body fat acts like an endocrine organ in that it actually secretes estrogen. So body fat secretes estrogen in your body. And obviously, the longer and more we're exposed to excess estrogen, the higher our breast cancer risk goes. The other thing is that obese girls tend to experience the onset of puberty earlier than their non-obese peers. And this will lead to more years of the breast tissue being exposed to the estrogen that can cause excessive cell growth and potentially lead to cancer. The other way is that obesity is associated with inflammation. And we see now and we know that obesity is a known risk factor for breast cancer. It's also a known risk factor for COVID-19, in part because of the inflammatory response. And inflammation damages cells. Damaged cells can go on to become cancerous. So, getting to a healthy body weight and tackling this issue is certainly not an easy task. And unfortunately, we know that diets don't work. But this is such an important health-related issue, it really deserves attention, even though it's a challenge. Because if someone is overweight, just losing 1% of their body weight can actually slash their risk of all diseases in half. So even just a step in the right direction is important to take. If this is a concern for you, this area, it certainly deserves more time and attention. And I've made a separate special video that I definitely want you to go look for. And it'll be on Facebook and it'll be on YouTube. It's going to be called Habits of Health and Weight Loss. So if that's a concern, make sure you address that issue. There is help, there are tools, and we can tackle this together. Now, there's two more ways that estrogen can be influenced, and one is through alcohol consumption. Now, there are three ways that alcohol consumption can raise our risk of breast cancer. The first is that it actually increases your body's production of estrogen. Secondly, it will then slow your rate of breakdown of estrogen, so it stays in your body longer. And third, it'll make the breast cells more sensitive to estrogen's effects. So it's really a triple whammy of breast cancer risk factors and really good reasons to limit consumption of alcohol. Then there are chemicals in our environment, in our lives, that actually act like estrogens. And that's a concern because even though they're not naturally occurring estrogen, they act like estrogen in your body, so they have the same risk factors. The two main ones I'd like to address are pesticides and plastics. Now, plastics, especially if you look at the number on them, numbers 3, 6, and 7, can leach into the foods or the beverages that we have in these containers and have estrogen-like effects in the body. So, switching to glass or stainless steel containers, not microwaving in plastic, little tweaks can just lower your exposure to these estrogen-like compounds, and it's well worth the small effort that it takes. The other thing is that plastics aren't good for the environment, so that's a double benefit for your body and for the planet. The pesticide issue is of very big concern because we have, quite a volume of pesticides going into our food system. And this is where you've probably heard me talk about EWG.org, Environmental Working Group, where they have a list and they call it the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. And so they list the produce items, fruits and vegetables, that tend to be contaminated most highly when they test with pesticides, and that's on the Dirty Dozen list. And then the Clean 15, where they show us the things where we can save our money and not worry about buying organic because they tend not to show up in testing. So I highly recommend that you check out those lists and consider making some tweaks in the way that you shop, especially if you consume a lot of fruits and vegetables, which we know is of health benefit. If something on that list you're eating a lot, then it'd be well worth purchasing that item organic. Not on those lists, but on my list would be wheat and corn. So when you buy bread or you buy a bag of tortilla chips, I strive for getting organic because wheat and corn are just highly sprayed crops, and we know that, so I aim for organic there. Also, important to note that animal products, the food, I always say you are what you eat, and pesticides will compound as we go up the food chain. So animal products, consider improving the quality of products that you get, things that are organic or grass-fed or local, free range. Those type of things can help improve the quality of the animal's existence, the impact on the planet, and then the impact in your body. So well worth the effort there if you have the option. Next thing to consider is paying attention to our nutrition and knowing that the things that we put in our mouth can help us lower our risk and improve our health. We first need to talk about a high fiber diet. Of course, a diet high in fruits and vegetables, we know, is one of the best strategies for building our health. But the fiber in a high fruit and veggie diet in particular helps us with lowering our breast cancer risk because fiber acts like a sponge and soaks up the excess estrogen in your body and helps you get rid of it. So concentrating on a high fruit and veggie diet, and definitely consider, since most of us are not getting enough fiber in our diets, even when we are eating a number of servings of fruits and veggies, consider adding something like organic psyllium husk. That can just go right in water, stir it up, drink it, and that adds a good bit of fiber. It can also be stirred into things, chia seeds. So look for ways to add fiber to your life. It's definitely beneficial for your health. Special attention should be given to cruciferous vegetables because cruciferous vegetables contain very unique phytochemicals that are chemoprotective and have been shown to protect against breast cancer, colon cancer, cervical cancer. They're just naturally occurring in these plants, and cruciferous veggies are like kale, cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli. So there's a range of them, Brussels sprouts, that you can just add to your diet on a regular basis to reap the benefits from those naturally occurring phytochemicals. Omega-3 fats are another thing to consider. They have been shown to inhibit the development and slow the progression of a range of human cancers. The important thing to note about omega-3 fats is it's more important, or the ratio is more important. Omega-3s and 6s are supposed to be in a 1-to-1 ratio in your diet and in your body. Unfortunately, the standard American diet tends to be about 20-to-1. So there's way too many omega-6s in our diets, and even increasing the omega-3s isn't as beneficial to our health as doing both, raising the 3s and lowering the 6s. So we talk about this in nutrition class, but sources of omega-3s would be wild Alaskan salmon, sardines, hemp seeds, walnuts, and then lowering our omega-6s, we want to look for all of the corn oil, canola oil, vegetable oil, all those junk oils that we might be cooking with or are in all of the packaged food that we buy. Those we need to keep to a minimum. I strongly recommend a fish oil supplement. Even when we tweak our diet, it's a challenge for most people to get the omega-3s up to the right level. So a fish oil supplement could really help nutritionally, and fish oil is important for, or the omega-3 fats are important for so much besides breast cancer risk, important for heart and cardiovascular health, brain health, mood. It's just important that those are at the right level. I would also recommend that you consider getting a blood test. An omega-3 index can show you your 3-to-6 ratio and help you judge whether you need more supplementation or how you're doing with your supplementation. When it comes to supplements, I also recommend very highly considering a vitamin D supplement. Now, there was a study of 844 women, and it found that there was an 80% lower incidence of breast cancer in the women who had a greater than or equal to 50 nanograms per milliliter vitamin D level. So the average, I think what's considered normal, is 30 to 60. And what they found is that under 50, those women did not have the protective effect. And over 50 or higher, they did. Again, I highly recommend blood testing, and you can get both the omega-3 test and the vitamin D test and do it yourself through the mail from grassrootshealth.net, or you can ask your doctor for it. But the vast majority of us are not getting enough vitamin D. It's getting cooler, we're not getting as much sunshine, and that's typical for most of the year. So supplement levels can need to be adjusted quite high to get into the really healthy range. And there's some evidence that vitamin D in those higher levels is really helpful for preventing flu, potentially COVID, and a lot of other infectious diseases, because it's important for your immune system. So definitely think you should test and supplement with vitamin D combined with vitamin K. Last supplement I'd like to mention is turmeric, or the active component of turmeric called curcumin. And it is an all-around just rock star as far as supplements go. Curcumin is a potent anti-inflammatory, and inflammation damages cells. So if we can protect ourselves from inflammation, less damage, less aging, less potential for cancer. So it's definitely on my list of supplements that I take. And when it comes to breast cancer, there is evidence that turmeric or curcumin has been shown to slow the growth of breast cancer cells. So this is just a sampling of the many things that are within your control to take action on, to make yourself healthier and literally lower your risk of cancer and all other diseases at the same time. So if you'd like more information specific to breast cancer, I definitely recommend you check out breastcancer.org. And on their website, if you look for the tab that says risk factors, and then look for Think Pink, Live Green, this is a fantastic publication that really emphasizes the pro-health, pro-prevention, real-life actions that you can take to not just not just detect cancer, but to actually prevent it, which is really my goal for all of us, because detection is important, but certainly I'd rather prevent than ever detect. So, who are you going to share this information with is my question. Do the like, subscribe, that whole thing, but physically send this video to someone else. Share this link with someone else and be part of the solution. Stop looking to fight disease and start building health.